next up, we are on the presentations. So we have I believe the first tonight in the town of Shelburne, a proclamation regarding Pride Month, and this was initiated by Deputy Mayor Anderson. So I'll read the proclamation. Whereas the town of Shelburne is a welcoming community and an exceptional place to live, learn, work, play, and raise a family. And whereas the town of Shelburne recognizes the importance of equality and freedom. And whereas the town is dedicated to fostering acceptance of all of its residents and preventing discrimination and bullying based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And whereas the town of Shelburne is strengthened by and thrives upon the rich diversity of ethnic, cultural, racial, gender, and sexual identities of its residents, all of which contribute to the vibrant character of our town. Now therefore, I, Wade Mills, Mayor of the town of Shelburne, and on behalf of Town Council, hereby proclaim and recognize June 2019 as Pride Month in the town of Shelburne. So there you have it. Excellent. All right, so thank you, Deputy Mayor, for bringing that up. So the next presentation is from Greg and Heather Holmes. Share the podium there.
Oh yeah, I gotta help because you guys aren't talking in the mic. Good evening. Introductions are in order because the last time we were here, there was a different council. So we are Greg and Heather Holmes, organizers of Pickin' in the Park. And we represent a group of about 50 volunteers who have worked hard over the last 6 years to host Pickin' in the Park. This camping and music event was conceived as a weekend festival to use the underutilized Fiddle Park and to provide that festival under a low operating budget. We now entertain more than 1,000 visitors from all corners of Ontario, still provide camping, music all weekend, and it's still done with that low operating budget. Over the past 6 years, this event has raised over $150,000, which has now funded the standing pavilion that you see in Fiddle Park. That pavilion is a great asset to the park. It's a gathering place, a shelter for events, as all of you have seen. From using this structure, more wind shelter protection is what we feel is required. We have received a quote to close in the north side and part of each end, as you will see in your drawings. Vertical aluminum siding will be used with proper bracing on the inside. Pickin' in the Park would like to donate the completion of this job to Shelburne's Fiddle Park Pavilion. We are here to ask this council to accept the donation and to allow us to proceed with the work immediately before Pickin' in the Park 2019. Pickin' in the Park will assume the cost of this upgrade to the pavilion. During our meeting with the contractor, we also inquired about repairing the leaking roof caps and adding eaves troughs on the remaining open sides. It's our understanding that money was held back from the original contractor to fix the leaking roof and to fund the eaves troughs that have been budgeted in 2019. We've also received a quote for those repairs, and which you also have, and would ask council to approve that quote and get the necessary work completed by the same contractor at the same time as the wall request. We thank you for your attention and for considering this donation from Pickin' in the Park. Any questions?
So the quote that you provided, who was that provided to?
Which one do you have? Do you have the one for the...
You have the quote for the repairing of the ridge caps and the eaves troughs, I believe. Do you interested?
We don't have any quotes here.
Oh, it was given to Patty a couple weeks
It
ago?
was. I do have...
I have a copy.
We do have a copy here. There's the quotes have come. We've received them from Cross Country Eaves Trough. They're Mennonite based. group out of Mount Forest. They have the necessary WSIB coverage that is required.
And Patty said it fell between when you're holdback.
Yes.
Held back from the construction of the building.
For this, okay.
Yeah. And the other costs, putting up the siding, strapping it, again, all the costs of covering it, we would cover that cost. There's also some repairs that need to be done to the gable ends to have it covered in, and I think it's another $1,000 on what our cost is, so we will cover that cost. Again, there's no cost to the town to finish the siding up. We will cover the cost. The last 2 years we've had it up, just the wind, sun, everything else, we tarped it for 2 years now, and then we figured on doing this when we put the building up. It just costing it would be done down the road, so.
To do the enclosure.
And we're only closing in from the doors north side, yeah. So we're keeping the south side open for our event. We focus all our crowd to the south. Canada Day, I think is the same. I have known it for a couple of years, Canada Day. Fiddle Weekend's the same. Most of the functions that are out there, that's why it was built on the hill for like an amphitheater, basically. So we'll keep that side.
How long do you think they'll take to do this?
If we get approval right away, they'll have it done before July, or for our weekend, because we can have it done.
Okay. The clerk's just indicating here, under our normal procedure, our procurement policy, indicate we would have to get 3 quotes and everything, but if we can override that.
We can go single quote.
By council resolution.
I'll write that resolution. You get a blank piece of paper. I'll second that. Back to the quote. I've been there on a windy day and a rainy day. I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah,
So
now we gotta get that roof
that
fixed too.
I'll second that.
The leaking is as bad as anything.
What's that? Yeah.
So essentially, Greg, it'll just be strapping put on the existing
Yep, you
posts
want
over
to
there.
expand
And
a
it's,
bit
you know,
about basically what they're doing, and you read his quote, new siding on the west side, which actually is the north side,
yeah.
and then also each end from west to center door. Regent gray, 29 gauge, the color of the steel is the same as the gable ends to match up, so it'll be gray siding. Screwed in place, 2x4 strapping every 24 inch, pressure treated 2x10s on the bottoms. And because of the unique framing style, the gable ends, the water will be running down the insides the way it's designed. He will fix that. No, that's not, we didn't ask for that, but he will fix that for another $1,000 to make it proper. So
Water will be on the outside.
yeah, basically, if you look at the building, there's a 2x12 that goes down each side, and it's outside the gable end. So when the water hits the gable end, it runs down. So he says in another 10 years, those will have to be replaced. They need to be fixed. So done properly.
Okay. So you'll look after that too.
So they will do that too. Yeah, we'll cover that cost.
Okay. So again, in terms of process, the CAO is just indicating that, I guess, in order to facilitate this, the way to do it is the donation would have to be made to the town, and then we would contract with the company because it's town property, I'm assuming, as opposed to having you guys as individuals contract with cross country. Does that work?
Yep, that's fine.
As long as it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, time framing, July is a month away. So, I mean, that's the crucial thing.
Well, if this resolution passes tonight, that gives town staff the authority to enter into a contract with these folks, right away, based on that quote.
No, that's fine.
So I guess the sooner we have the money to pay them, or whenever they want to pay it,
It's
30
30
days or whatever.
Yeah.
25% down, a signed copy, and 30 days
And
completion.
so then we would pay the town of Shelburne?
You pay that.
And we'll contract with
It's a
them.
donation. You're
Yeah.
making a
That's
donation.
fine.
So you
Sure.
make the donation to the town of Shelburne, you write the check,
Yep.
cash. And we in turn will hire this firm based on council approving a single source. And in terms of whatever you outlined, for example, if they said they would have it done by July, we would expect that same term to be met.
Yep.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, do we need to include total dollar amount?
Just
Siding as well.
putting them in based on, so if the quote is 1,300 and
But this is only for the ridge cap.
That's for your ridge cap, and the
So what's the total project?
total project is,
Well, that's not even gonna be the total.
well, it'll be
because-
7186 plus approximately $600 to fix
So
it.
can you-
Just under 10 grand.
Under
So-
10,000.
Under 8,000.
So, yep, just under 10,000?
Yeah, almost under 9, under
8,000?
Yeah,
Yep, set limit?
Does that include tax too?
that's a good tax, yeah. 7186 is the cost of the framing, and he said $500 to $600 to fix this, the end caps.
They have two to quote.
And this is a company?
That quote is for what's under your
That's for
pro.
the deficiencies currently
Yeah.
existing in the,
This is only for the current deficiencies, right?
Yeah.
We have a holdback for.
Yeah, you have a hold back for that stuff.
Okay, and who's doing the siding and all that?
Same guy.
Same guy or what? So that's the quote for everything? Or that's just the quote for the siding?
Just the siding. This one's already included in the setbacks for the original.
So we don't need that one, I need this one.
Don't put that amount in it. That one, because that doesn't include the extras repair work that he's gonna do for us.
Yeah, it's in the middle of the second paragraph, $500 to $600 additional.
There's an upset limit they're going to set.
At a cost.
Did he indicate roughly how much that might cost?
$500 to $600.
Okay.
Yeah,
Why don't you put it up
it's in
there?
the
So
paragraph.
it's in the paragraph, it's just not on the bottom line
Okay.
code there,
Yeah,
so.
that's an additional, if you would like to fix it.
It's like 8,000.
I would think at the most.
If I may, I just want to confirm that the donation, and I assume that we have to ask this in all donations that we receive, but this is a donation without any conditions, right? In the sense that no, I'm serious. It's anytime you receive donations from a member of the public, sometimes there are conditions, sometimes there are not, but it's an appropriate question to.
No, we have kind of a contract with the town to carry on. We still owe money on the completion of the building, but this would be additional. We've got a set payment structure. We're pretty well paid out. Get close. We keep using the park for a few more years. Perfect in the park. Give away our weekend.
Are you making a?
Get in there.
Almost done.
Writing a book.
Okay, so we have a motion moved by Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Buffett. Be it resolved, the council will waive the 3 quotes required by the town's procurement policy and accept the quote from Cross Country Eavesdrop for an upset limit of $10,000 and that they provide WSIB proof and liability insurance in the amount of $5 million, naming the town Any questions or comments on that? Satisfied with that? Yeah, okay. All right, all in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much for the generous donation.
Thank you.
I guess we can, do you want these quotes back or?
No, I have.
Are those photocopies?
Okay.
Okay.
See you next couple of days.
All right, so I guess, yeah, we'll sort it out in the next couple of days.
Okay.
Get it in there. Perfect.
Thank you very much.
All right, so the third and final presentation is Len Mikulich presenting a petition regarding police services. Good evening, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and Council, this is it. Council will have to make its most important historical decision regarding 140 years of the Shelburne Police Service. Your challenges are no more difficult than the forefathers. Tonight I address you as a citizen who measures town council by its success and of its challenges and decisions you make. Council, as you are aware, your challenge is to provide police services as required under the Police Services Act of Ontario. In retrospect, Mr. Mayor and Council, I have seen mistakes past councils have made in not taking proactive fiscal responsibility in establishing funding for our police service. These past actions are regrettable, and as you are now facing this monumental decision, Mr. Mayor and Council, I must ask, are you willing to give up the Shelburne Police Service for what ultimately will be for fiscal motivations only? Our police service has long demonstrated history of providing an excellent service to the community using sound financial strategies. Council, let's not abandon the future because of the lack of foresight from the past. History has shown that while contracts with the Ontario Provincial Police initially seemed like a quick fix to financial pressures, there is ultimately always a price that will be paid by the communities and citizens affected. The very definition of community police service, such as what we've had here for the past 140 years, is tailored to our community. It is sensitive to the ebb and flow of our citizens and is always prepared to step in with a tailored solution that meets our expectations. Our police service, the men and women of our service, live in our community, serve our community, and support our community. The Shelburne Police Service will never be expected to allocate a percentage of their staff to support an operational pressure elsewhere in the province. The chief of the Shelburne Police Service will not have to worry about other pressures within Dufferin County which they're facing and then have to allocate staff to support them. That's because it's our community police service. It's not a provincial police service. There is always talk that Shelburne Police is too small to survive, that it lacks all the services of a larger police service. And in our case, the latter is certainly true. But we must ensure that all the facts are exposed before such a critical decision, one that will affect our community forever, is decided. A police service agreement with the OPP is not a one price for all services approach. The agreement would be for basic police services, a provincial answer to our community need. If, for example, other services are requested, such as a traffic management enforcement, forensic identification, specialized crime investigation, or a host of others, then there will and is an additional fee allocated. So the argument that if the OPP service Shelburne, then we would have those services at no additional costs rings hollow. Under the current Police Services Act and in the new Community Safety Police Act, both demand and direct that agreements exist between the OPP or another police service with the local police service to ensure that the specialized capacity is available. and the fees will be very similar. So where is the cost saving? Mr. Mayor and Council, you should know that Sir Robert Peel created 9 rules or guiding principles which have acted as a foundation for policing both in Canada and in the United Kingdom. One guiding principle which is directly applicable to the decision we are facing now is this one. Police at all times should maintain a relationship with the public that gives reality to the historic tradition that the police are public and the public are the police. The police being only members of the public who are paid to give full-time attention to duties which are incumbent on every citizen in the interests of community welfare and existence. That is the very definition of community-based policing and the very foundation of what our police services have operated on for the past 140 years. The OPP faces the same demands as any police service in Ontario. They have fixed number of officers, a budget that has recently seen a cutback of $42 million, and a growing rate of retirements that stresses their ability to meet the minimum staffing levels. These are the realities facing all police services. The big difference is that the OPP is responsible to patrol over 1 million square kilometers of land and 174,000 square kilometers of water to a population of approximately 3 million people versus 6.4 kilometers and a population of approximately 8,126 for the Shelburne Police Service. Which description sounds more likely community policing to you? Our community should and does have a voice in this decision. You know, everyone driving through our town can't help but notice signs stating, "Keep our Shelburne Police," sprouting up on our lawns and everywhere. Petitions are being signed. I'll just ask my team here, they're right here, thank you. Petitions are being signed with this debate that has been energizing our community. And it's not just the adults, our next generation of voting citizens are now engaged. Students are passionate and mobilized and also demand to have a voice in a decision that will affect their future. I will shortly be presenting you a signed petition by not only our current voting citizens, but another sign which is included in this package of our citizens from our high schools and our younger future generation voters who are also demand to be heard. A decision of this magnitude cannot be made in isolation, and it is a community decision, and the community that you serve have sworn an oath to demands to be heard. So in closing, or shall I say, so the question ultimately becomes, yes, the town is facing financial pressures, but fortunately the town is also witnessing tremendous growth that is unprecedented in Shelburne's history. Growth always equals increased levels of property taxes, which should equal, improve, or enhance community service. The reality is that over time, growth manages properly will reduce or eliminate the fiscal pressures. So, therefore, Council, are you prepared to fundamentally change policing tradition of Shelburne, one that has been proud of for 140 years history based on community service tailored to our needs and expectations? Do we exchange that for a provincial one-size-fits-all answer, one tailored to 3 million people, where the influence that Shelburne would have based on an overall population would be about 0.003%. And let's not forget, this conversation started to save money today, while in the near future, revenues will grow. In closing, Mr. Mayor and Council, if you decide to go with the OPP service, this decision, once made, will be massively costly if ever to be reversed. This decision will become your community legacy. At this time, Mr. Mayor and Council, Thank you for listening to my presentation. I'm going to just briefly read to you and announce the numbers of people who have signed this petition. And the petition to keep our Shelburne Police reads as follows. We, the undersigned, being concerned residents and or business owners of the town of Shelburne, do strongly believe that it would be in our best interest to continue to have our local policing needs served by the Shelburne Police Service rather than having those needs contracted out to the Dufferin Detachment of the Ontario Provincial Police. And we urge our duly elected members of council to retain the Shelburne Police Service for our town policing needs. I'm pleased to report, Mr. Mayor and Council, that we have a total, and I'm going to submit this to you as I speak, we have a total of 1,059 people who have signed this petition, and attached with this is the petition from our high schools, and I'll just fold it in there. And in town, there were 735 people, and out of town there was 276, and we have 48 unknown, which those people didn't disclose their address or their email. I'm wanting to share with you the two lovely young people in our future generation who are here with me today. On our left is Ashton Rolfe, and on our right is Elizabeth O'Darton. Thank you so much for being here. I'm thanking you for your kindness and your attempts to speak up and present this to the council. And Mr. Mayor, I present this to you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You want to say something? It's up to you. You don't.
Thank you.
No, they're fine. They may want to take
Okay. Do you have a printed copy of your comments? Would you mind submitting that as well, just so that the record's clear?
You wanted to present this to you, sir.
Sir. Okay, so the motion reads, be it resolved, the council receives the presentation information from Len Mikulich. Mover and seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Hull. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Motion carries. All right, so that's it for presentations. I think at this point, we'll maybe just take a very, very brief recess, 5 minutes, just to sort of let us regroup. We can change some of our paperwork up here. Space is a bit tight. And then we'll reconvene at, 5 minutes. 8:52, and we'll jump right back into council inquiries.
To raise it in celebration of the proclamation that you read.
Okay, and we need a resolution for that, I believe. Okay. Do you mind if I carry out the agenda? And
Sure, absolutely.
draft up a resolution, and we'll circle back and consider that one?
I have one more.
Yep, Councilor Donovan.
I would like to thank town staff. They have gone out on all the sidewalks. They have orange, not only the sections which are lifted up in orange paint, but they have even done the cracks in the sidewalks, and they've gone throughout the whole town. And I'd like to thank them for doing that. I think that that's something that assists, especially if you have sight impairment and the different levels of the sidewalk. So I know that it's marked for repairs, some of it, but just the fact that they marked all of it makes it very helpful for those with vision impairment.
James asked to pass that along to the work staff. Councilor Wagner?
Yeah, I have, I guess, just a couple of questions here that I've sort of been approached by the community. I guess my first question here would be, are there any rules with setting up a Facebook page or a group that states it represents Shelburne? So for an example, like, do we have any policies or bylaws in place? Facebook is its own entity, so I don't know if we can even police something like that. But I was asked, you know, if anyone can just create a page that says, hey, welcome to Shelburne, and promote whatever they want within that page.
I guess as long as it's not purporting to represent the corporation of the town of Shelburne,
Right.
there's
There's
very
no
little we
potential
can do, yeah.
Okay. Second question would be, does the town have a property standard policy or bylaw that would allow, say, our bylaw officer to approach a property not complaint-based, but just basically he's driving by, sees that the property is in disarray, and would be able to file a notice or something of that nature?
Yeah, our bylaw regime right now is based on the complaint-driven model. It's a policy consideration that the last council looked at, you know, to some degree. Maybe it's time we look at that again. I don't disagree. So, I mean, my suggestion, I know staff is busy right now. Once we sort of get over the next month or so and get through the rest of this police issue and some other things, I think that's a discussion that I would like to have again with this group. I know Councillor Bernardo has some thoughts on that too, as we've talked in the past.
Your Worship, I'm wondering if writing a motion, because it's notice of motion, and we're coming towards the end of the month where we're going to either have to make a decision or on this particular issue that's in front of staff, writing a notice of motion so that maybe report back what the consequences would be in, say, July or something like that, regarding changing from complaint to proactive by law enforcement. Would that be, I can put that forward tonight as a notice of motion?
Yeah, I don't see the harm in bringing forward a notice of motion. July deadline might be kind of tough and unfair on staff.
Well, I can extend it to some point, but I'd like, that way at least they've got time factor in there that we can bring it back, whether it's July, August, or September. You know, so that there's a time factor. And since I got some blank paper,
Well,
I might as well do something with it.
My suggestion would be prepare a notice of motion on the 24th when the motion is considered. If there's concerns about the deadline or the date that's included, we can amend that accordingly.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you have a blank resolution?
Oh, yeah.
Should have known better than to ask that. All right. Any other inquiries? I think we're almost back to where we started here. All right, so this relates to the Deputy Mayor's earlier comment, which relates to the proclamation regarding Pride Month. So moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Buffett, be it resolved the Council approve the raising of the Pride flag for the remainder of June pursuant to the town's current flag raising protocol. Any questions or comments on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, the consent agenda. The motion is be it resolved the council receives items number 1 to 4 under section 7 sub A consent agenda as presented and circulated. The mover and seconder on that. Moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Bernardo. Any items that anybody wants to pull out? All in favor? Carried. Okay, on to consideration of items. First, we have a report from the Treasurer regarding the municipal grant funding request from the Shelburne Farmers Market. The report's in the agenda. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, so in the interest of time, we'll just move along. The motion reads, be it resolved, the Council receives report FS 2019-10 from the Treasurer as presented and circulated, and the Council approves the donation request from the Shelburne Farmers Market in the amount of $1,000 for 2019, in addition to in-kind services totaling $2,994. The mover and seconder for that one. Moved by Councillor Buffett, seconded by Councillor Wegener. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Mayor Mills, sorry, can I just make one more comment on that?
Sure.
Can I just ask that that we have a formal appointed representative from council to represent the farmers market? In past, Councillor Buffett was the representative to the BIA, and so I'm not sure if she will be the representative from council or if you want to do
That
that.
was the practice last term. I was the council representative on the PIA, and by virtue of that fact, I became the de facto council board member on the farmers market board. Unless anybody has any major concern with that, I don't see any reason to divert from that approach. Okay. So you got yourself another job.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, secondly is a report from the Director of Development and Operations regarding Connecting Links Program grant application. Jim, you want to touch on that?
Through your worship, through the Connecting Links program, the province is investing in construction and repair of roads, bridges on Connecting Links. Connecting Links are municipal roads designated under Public Transportation and Highway Improvement Act. And there are 77 municipalities within the province that are designated with Connecting Links and are eligible for this funding intake. And the town of Shelburne is eligible this year for 2019. The objectives of the Connecting Link are to make Connecting Link investments, addressing critical Connecting Link improvement needs, extending life cycle of the asset, and are cost effective and appropriate for the Connecting Link needs. The ministry will provide up to 90% of the funding, up to a maximum of $3 million, and of eligible costs for these improvements. The program is a one-stage application. Municipalities with one designated link can make one application. Municipalities with more than one designated link can submit two. The town of Shelburne technically has three portions: Main Street West, Main Street East, and 017 North. This application submission must include project application form that's completely filled out, asset management plan information, and declaration by a municipal official certifying that all submission requirements have been met, as well as a council resolution and bylaw supporting the application. This report recommends that the application be made for resurfacing for two of the connection links that we have, 017 Street down to Main Street, and Main Street 900 meters to the east to Simon Street, as shown on Appendix 1, sorry. Complete applications for 017 Street and Main Street are attached as Appendix 2 and 3, respectively. The council resolution to support this application must be submitted by June 14th, 2019 by 5 p.m. So, the estimated cost for resurfacing of these two sections for this year is $1,087,485.84. It should be noted that the town has applied previously under previous Connecting Link programs in 2017 and 18 and was turned down but unsuccessful. The Connecting Links program will fund up to 90% of the cost of resurfacing projects. The town must fund a minimum of 10% of that. Which our minimum cost then would be $108,748.58. This could be funded from our capital reserve or the roads construction reserves. It's possible that the project may be approved by the province and not cover the full 90% of that. So in that case, the town's portion would proportionately go up. As of December 31st, 2018, the roads construction reserve had a balance of $430,847. So, and in the consultations and communications in preparing this report and the applications, we consulted with Burnett Associates, who updated our roads needs study to reflect the rapidly declining portion of the Connecting Link that we have that wasn't reflective of when the report was originally done in 2015. It's getting bad quick, so. As well as town staff, including our GIS coordinator, who's updating our asset management accordingly with the roads needs study, as well as our treasurer for the financial portion and our CIOs.
Okay, so the resolution that is being recommended tonight is just simply what has to accompany the applications in order to be considered.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the motion reads as follows. Be it resolved, the council receives report D0-2019-08 Connecting Links Program 2019-20 grant application from the Director of Development and Operations as presented and circulated, and the council supports and authorizes the submission of grant applications to the Connecting Links Program 2019-20 for funding for the resurfacing of Owen Sound Street and Main Street East portions of the Connecting Link, and that the Town of Shelburne's portion of the funding for the resurfacing project be funded from the Roads Construction Reserve. The mover and seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Donato. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Jim.
Sorry, can I ask you one question?
Sure.
Jim, no, stay where you are, it's okay. Stay where you are. We own, the connecting link stops at Simon Street, you said, right?
Yes.
Who does between Simon and Centennial?
Simon and Centennial. That is technically MTO's portion of that. They do our winter control for the whole connecting links, and they are passing it over anyway. That is the MTO portion of that.
That's the MTO portion. So when we repair ours, if there's any deficiencies in their part, are they going to repair theirs?
Three Worship was notified by MTO, but they are looking at resurfacing and resealing right up to Shelburne on all sides. So Highway 10 in to the connecting link and 89 from both sides this summer. So
This summer?
They do plan to do some improvements yet.
Good.
Well, yeah, but then, and on the north end, is similar situation? They're going to do improvements there as well? On
Three Worship, yes.
Okay. It's just that there's some bad sections up there, especially with heavy truck traffic coming through. It's not doing any of our roads any justice. I'm wondering if it's time to set up a toll like we do on the 407 so we can pay for some of these repairs.
All right. Other notes and motions on it?
I might be.
All right, next up we have a report from Steve Burnett regarding a general engineering update. Good news report, right?
Yeah.
Always good news.
Go home, Steve.
So I am providing an update to council and engineering update. It is a hefty report, and I do apologize that we weren't able to put it up on presentation. But what I wanted to provide to council is an update on the wastewater class environmental assessment that has been ongoing. With that, we will include an update on the assimilated capacity study, infiltration and extraneous flows reduction. Although not necessarily part of the class environmental assessment, we will talk about the odor issues as well. I assume somebody was going to ask about them anyways, so we'd add that to the presentation. An update on the water supply class EA, which our firm is also undertaking, as well as the well 3 upgrades as we go through. So I do want to explain to council, especially for the new members of council, that the majority of the first half of this presentation are taken directly from the Public Information Center that was held on April 23rd, 2018. So if it's okay with council, I'll probably breeze over those slides a little quicker if there's any questions at all with respect to that. I do know council has provided those boards, but I will try and get it at a high level, just because I realize it will be a late evening for everyone tonight. So I don't think it's any surprise, or it's been brought up in several different discussions, that the Town of Shelburne has experienced significant growth, which was part of the reason for moving ahead with the sewage Class C, the municipal Class EA in the first place. As I had indicated, that Class EA was initiated in February 2017, and the first Public Information Center was held here at Town Hall April 23rd, 2018. Just so that Council is aware there's sort of two components that goes into that class environmental assessment. The first is analyzing the existing wastewater treatment facility, looking at the hydraulic loadings, the process, those things that are internal to the sewage treatment plant. The other component, which we refer to as an assimilative capacity study, is how much effluent or what the quality of the effluent that can be discharged to the local receiving stream. And that's really the assimilated capacity that I was referring to. As a bit of a history, and I'm not going to go into a detail there, but what it does explain on the next board is essentially the original system was set up as a lagoon system built in 1968. That was then converted into a wastewater treatment plant in 1981 with an average capacity of about 2,045 cubic meters per day. There were then 3 expansions done to the sewage treatment plant over the years, one in 99, one in 2006, and another in 2010. Each of those expansions were to look at increasing the capacity of the sewage treatment plant lagoon, and then you can see on there, we also showed the original cost of each of those expansions, as well as if you were to inflate those numbers to 2018, just to give council a bit of an appreciation for the investment that has already gone in to the sewage treatment plant. The last upgrade that occurred would happen in 2016. This was an upgrade that SBA was involved in. It was increasing the tertiary system of the sewage treatment plant. So just to explain to council, for those that are not familiar with a treatment process, it's referred to as primary treatment, which is the first level of treatment. Secondary is the second level of treatment, a cleaner effluent. And then tertiary is really the third level of treatment. It's the highest level you can get for sewage. There's only those 3 levels of treatment. After that, there's then disinfection in the plant. Here in Shelburne, it uses UV as disinfection to ensure there's no pathogens, nothing in the effluent, and then it's discharged back to the natural water course. So that upgrade did happen in 2016 and actually increased the capacity and provided redundancy for the tertiary filters in the existing plant. The existing wastewater treatment plant, again, has some of the information there about where it discharges, shows a bit of a map about where the different facilities are. Again, I won't go into a lot of detail there, but the one thing to note is after each of these expansions have happened, the current rated capacity of the existing plant is 3,420 cubic meters a day, and the peak rated capacity is 8,921 cubic meters a day. So that's the flow that the sewage treatment plant is currently designed to handle. I have come in front of council before indicating that there has been several different initiatives, different things done that has actually allowed the flows to be reduced significantly. And right now that plant is running at about 74% capacity and still underneath those flow rates. You'll see here there was an assimilated capacity study completed by WSP, who was the previous town municipal consultant. That assimilated capacity was set to increase the plant capacity from that 3,420 cubic meters a day up to approximately 4,400 cubic meters a day. And we did find, when we met with the ministry recently, that final report was not submitted to the ministry, so we have submitted that report now in the form it was, and that was submitted February 2019 for the MECP to review and provide comment on that assimilated capacity. The next slide is really just showing the population growth. I realize council has seen this in several different fashions, but again, these were some of the outlines that were put together for the Public Information Center. You will see there, and I know Steve Weaver from GSP Group has already said there's been some slight modifications to this since this slide was created back in 2018. However, you can see the general trend and increase in population that has occurred in Shelburne. And the two lines that are on there basically show where the build-out capacity for the town of Shelburne within the current urban boundaries could be. And that generally is between 13,000 people and 15,000 people. To bring that into context, the 4,400 that the assimilated capacity study was done on correlates to approximately 13,000 people residing within the town boundaries. The next page really gives the breakdown of the different projections that would be used. So the base year being 2021. The reason we set a base year 2, 3, 4 years out is we already know that it takes several years to get through a planning document like this. So we established the base year a few years out so that you're not already starting behind the 8 ball once the study gets completed. So we had set a base year of 2021. Also looked at the fact that in 2022 would be where our current ECA, or the current capacity of the plant, would be surpassed with respect to average day flows based on the projections. The assimilated capacity study was completed at 4,400, as we had indicated, which is the third column over. We also then looked at a 20-year projection, which is standard for a planning document or a municipal class EA to look at, which would correspond to approximately the 15,000 population that I had indicated, and would be a plant flow in the range of 5,100 cubic meters per day. And then on the side, we were just showing council sort of the existing wastewater treatment plant capacities for comparison purposes. The EA has advanced to the stage where we have completed all of the hydraulic analysis, we've completed the process analysis, so we really know where the current bottlenecks or where the current shortcomings within the existing plant are. As part of the EA process, we need to look at all of the alternatives that would be available for finding or looking at that expansion or capacity of the plant. Obviously, the first option is the do nothing alternative, which is to take no action, leave things the way they are, and move forward. Second alternative was to increase water efficiency, reduce extraneous flows. And as council knows, there's already been a fairly aggressive program of reducing inflow and extraneous flows within the town that you'll see has actually been fairly successful and really should continue. Alternative 3 is expand or upgrade the existing wastewater treatment plant. That really has two, an option 3A and a 3B. One is to expand to the 4,400, which is the sort of number that was set by the previous consultant. The second would be to go to build out capacity or a 20-year growth, which is typical of a class environmental assessment. The other options that were looked at was building a new second wastewater treatment plant for the additional flows, a new replacement wastewater treatment plant to deal with all of the flows from Shelburne, or a potential pipe connection that looked at connection to Agila, Torsorante, Alliston, Grand Valley, or Orangeville as options. Based on the work that was already completed and based on the work that was already presented to the previous council, these options were already narrowed down to continuing with the water efficiency and extraneous flow reduction, because that's not a full solution, but that is something that can actually improve things. To be fair, if you look at the chart that we've shown here on that one, you can see in the green line as to how high flows actually got in the town of Shelburne. If you look over 2007, 2008, with 2009 being really the highest flows that the town of Shelburne experienced. We then show different decisions that have been made by council over the years that were positive to reducing those inflows at the time. The first was the water metering program, which started to improve water efficiency, was ensuring that the users weren't just using water without acknowledging sort of that cost or that implication. The next was what we refer to as the sister street projects, and these were an older section of town. It's up in the north end of this was an area that had been identified as a very, very high infiltration from groundwater into the sanitary system. It was designed several years ago, built several years ago, and was having a lot of infiltration problems and was contributing to a lot of rainwater coming to the sewage treatment plant and then being treated. You can see over the time period that that was implemented, there was a fairly steady decrease in the flows to the plant during that time. The I&I improvements then became the more detailed work. Jack Tuckling actually headed that up when he was here. Jim, to be fair, has now continued with that program. And this was a point of going to each of the sanitary systems, videoing them, looking for leaks, looking for cracks, looking for details that was allowing rainwater into the system. And that was done on an annual basis and has also significantly improved treating rainwater or stormwater. The next slides, again, are directly from that public information center that was presented approximately a year ago. On the left-hand side, you will see the chart that essentially points out each of the components that would have to be upgraded at the sewage treatment plant in order to meet the 4,400 cubic meters a day. And again, for those members of council that I know some have been able to take a tour of the sewage treatment plant and see all the different components there, but there's about 8 different processes that happen at the sewage treatment plant. So it goes through headworks, it goes through the primary, it goes through secondary, it goes through tertiary. So each one of those processes has to be able to handle the average day flow that goes to that sewage plant and has to be able to handle the peak flows that could go to the sewage treatment plant. So what we've done in going through our analysis and the engineering side of this is we look at hydraulic loading, we look at process loading. So can a pump handle that amount of flow? Can a process actually process that amount of solids or that amount of BOD or suspended solids in the wastewater? So then what happens is it comes to different bottlenecks in the system. We've identified each of those bottlenecks under those higher future flows, and those would be capital projects that would be required to upgrade the plant to get to that level. You will see under the upgrade, expand wastewater treatment plant, the capital cost has been identified in the range of 9 to 11 million for the 3A option, which is upgrading to approximately a population of 13,000 or the 4,400. On the next page, you will see under the same headings, there's a couple additional items that then get added in as sub-processes that would be required. And each one of those would need to be upgraded to that higher level in order to get up to the 15,000 or 5,100 cubic meters a day. And that was estimated at a range of 12 to 14 million for that expanded upgrade. One of the things that maybe didn't pull out of the original PICs, and one of the things that we did talk about when the last presentation came to council, is that although the do nothing option does need to be looked at, there are some significant costs that would have to happen at the plant, even under that do nothing alternative, to bring the plant up to making sure that there's no bottlenecks within the current sort of scenario.
So if I can ask a question while we're going through this presentation. 11 to 14 mil, as I'm reading the next steps in the EA, where are the grants that would help us out in a situation like that? And then when you talked about piping, even the expansion of the plant is still the Besley Creek we're putting it in, right?
Yes, it is.
Have we ever thought of piping it and what the cost would be to pipe it a little further on up and away from the Besley to a different water source? Have we looked at something of that nature? Because I know you looked at Angela, Toronto, but they don't have a sewage treatment plant currently anywhere in there. Orangeville has problems with their own sewage treatment plant, so that's not an option for sure. And Alliston is on a piping system up the conduit, so not likely unless we buy into that. And the cost of piping it there would be astronomical anyway. So I'm just thinking like further up in towards the Boeing or the Pine, whatever, somewhere along that line there. We thought of going up, but
So at this point, those discussions have come up, Walter. One of the things is we need the feedback from the Ministry of the Environment on that simulated capacity, because as I said, the EA really goes through in both of those fashions. So that's something where we are looking at the health of that tributary. We're looking at the previous history of the effluent discharge into it, and then the historical piece to that. So while the question is a valid question, I really think that analysis has to come out of getting the feedback from MECP on that simulated capacity study. At this point, the ministry had originally committed to about a 3-month review period when that was submitted in February. I recently followed up with them, and they're now committing to about a mid-July response. So we'd be better positioned to answer that question once we hear back from the ministry of where they're at. But those options definitely have to be looked at as we're moving forward. One of the things is the current assimilated capacity study as presented indicates that the plant could go to 4,400 and still keep the health of the receiving stream as it is or better. And what really happens in most of these re-ratings is as you add more flow to something, you reduce concentrations. So it would be a reduction in the concentrations at the plant that are allowed to be discharged to that receiving stream in order to balance sort of that overall load into the plant.
So the only issue really is the money.
Well, it's always usually an issue, but yeah, at this point, it's not the only issue, because to be fair, as I say in step 1, we do need to receive those comments from the ministry. There will still be environmental and technical hurdles that we would have to work out with the ministry and their technical staff. Nottawasaga Valley has been engaged in the process and has been involved. Yeah. In fact, they provided a lot of the background history to that study. So yeah. There's also the operational side, and continuing with Aqua from the perspective that there are some operational things that are being done that when you go through a Class EA process like this, the science and the operations start to make sense. And as you sit down and say, well, here's what we see on the paper, and from a scientific perspective, operators go, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. Here's how we can change that. So what we are proposing at this stage is actually a sit down. We have sat with the operational group in a large group once already. We will be sitting down with them again to really look at sort of 3 levels of components, those things that can be done sort of immediately that aren't even in the Class EA process, ones that would be considered what is called a Schedule A project. So those are things that can move ahead right away. Again, to be fair, as long as funding was available or grants or different things could be made available. And then the longer term solution, which is the implementation of the full listing that we have presented. So.
Steve, sorry, just
no, that's fine.
Just one more follow-up. Under 3B, under that option that looks like $12 to $14 million, those numbers are slightly out of date at this point, I would assume, but I mean, it at least gives us a ballpark. 3B then, that option, does that basically eliminate the need for the outdoor storage pond that we're currently using? Okay. 3A would though? Or?
3A could as well. It's the difference is the size that you would build the plant to. So, and I do explain that a little bit more in the rest of the presentation, but 3A is essentially would be the option of expanding to sort of a number that was previously identified by the previous consultant as a target. To be fair, we don't quite understand why they didn't relate it to a population or a build out. It was a number that was selected as 4,400. The downside of that is that's also the number that the simulated capacity was based on. So that could still eliminate the storm ponds, but would be based on that flow of about 13,000 people. Would not get you a 20-year build out, which is usually standard for projection purposes. The other 3B would eliminate the storm ponds as well, but would get you to a population of approximately 15,000, equivalent to about a 20-year population.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess, as I said, and in answer to both the council and the mayor's questions, there is some work left to do from the perspective of getting that feedback from the ministry, continuing exchanges with the review agencies, other stakeholders that are involved. Recommend, because at this point, the recommendation was down to 3A or B, because to be fair, it's a council decision as to which one is the appropriate one to move forward for. We would then host another public information center for the public to gain additional input on the project. And then just based on the municipal Class A process, there is a 30-day review period where it would be posted and open for public commentation. And then, as was pointed out by council, there is the sourcing and securing of the costs of the project. I know, as council knows, there's been several different grant and funding applications and different issues that come forward at given times. Each of them, depending on which government it is, changes or modifies that. We will continue to keep council in the loop of any of the ones that we're aware of through our program of working with funding agencies and different groups. But at this point, really it's down to the similar ones that council is aware of. It's now been changed to ISIF instead of OSIF. We haven't heard anything about SCF in quite a while. CWWF was supposed to come back out again and hasn't. So there's several that were talked about that haven't come forward at this point.
So if I can go back just to what you said, you're looking for a recommendation right now from us to either move forward with 3A or 3B, right?
No, not at this point, Walter. At this point, it was really just an update to council as where we were at on that Class A process. I will come in front of council at a later date with the actual sort of recommendation once we've received the feedback from the ministry. But at this point, it was for information purposes and for council to be aware of the really the size of that investment and what's required at the site sheet plan.
So if the assembly capacity and the thing that's gone to the ministry for the UA is at 44,
Yep.
how do we get to 55 or whatever the next number is?
So
do we have to go back again to the ministry?
We
and
will
say,
have to
"You got
go
the wrong numbers. We want these numbers instead."
Not wrong, but what we didn't want to do is we didn't want to go forward and spend a lot of additional testing and additional monitoring to move forward and request a higher number without feedback on the original work that was done by WSP. So we want to get the receive the comments back on what it was set at. There could be the situation where the ministry says that's the limit, nothing beyond that would be acceptable, which then would drop 3B off of the table and right out of the gates from an environmental point of view. So at this point, you are correct. If we were to go back for the higher level, there will be updates required to that document. The ministry has actually already indicated to us that the 51 would be a more appropriate planning target, so that's why they're giving us engineering and technical feedback on the documentation that's been done to date. We will then decide as a group what the next step is, and that's when I would come back in front of the council with both an update as to where the ministry's at, as well as what our recommendation for moving forward would be. I guess before I move into the next item, which I kind of added about the odor issues, so at least I can maybe answer or pre-answer some questions. Is there any additional questions about the Class A process or anything? I realize I zoomed through it, so I do apologize for council, but if there's any questions on that portion before I move forward.
Has the provincial government shortened the EA process down and made it sort of process a little quicker? Did I sort of hear that? And does that apply to wastewater treatment plants as well, where they're moving at a faster pace in response to better Build Ontario, more housing, or whatever they called it, Bill 108?
Yeah, they are trying to streamline or improve the process. To be fair, this is a very comprehensive EA. There's a lot of things that had to be done on this. The ministry also, I think they play double duty whenever things happen, such as all the rains and all the different events that have happened this spring. We did hear from their staff that they have been pulled out of the office for different things, so their review time is somewhat extended on this one, but at the same time, I don't know that it could have moved any quicker at this point.
So in terms of timeline, Steve, I mean, realistically, when do you think that this work would start and the money would start being spent?
So at this point, we won't receive feedback from the ministry until July. Again, we were hoping that it was originally promised a month ago, but at the same time, that's the environment we're in. It would probably take us, depending on Councillor Walter's questions on whether we were going forward with the 51 or the 44. If everything was fine the way it was, we'd probably be into a position this fall to close out the EA. If there's additional work, additional testing required, we'd probably be into next spring before we can close out the EA. In either scenario, as we've indicated, around 2021, 2022 is really where our projections, based on the information we've done, would say that the plant would run out of capacity. So if you're thinking about an 18-month construction window, we're getting awfully close to where we should be spending money in order to move forward and to stay ahead of that curve.
So I mean, realistically, this has to be a part of our budget discussions for 2020. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Odor issues.
More issues, odor issues. And again, as I said, although it wasn't specifically a reason for the Class EA, we are aware that there has been odor issues at the sewage treatment plant, and I just wanted to be able to address that this evening. So first of all, I do want to clarify that the odors have not been caused by the increased population or community growth. If you look at the 2018 average day flows, they're actually less than the 2017 flows. Not a lot, slightly, about 3% less for average day, about 9% less for max day. And to be fair, the 2018 flows are actually about 4% lower than the 2009 that I referred to on the previous page, and 43% lower than the peaks that were experienced in 2007. However, part of the problem has been one of the benefits of tightening up the system, reducing the inflow and the infiltration, has been removing that stormwater, removing that rainwater that was being treated by the sewage treatment plant. The downside to that positive news story is that everything that's going to the sewage treatment plant is sewage. There's some of it still that's infiltration, there's some of it still rainwater, but we've significantly reduced that amount. So part of the difficulty with that is that there are stormwater management ponds at the existing sewage treatment plant. Those ponds were originally the sewage lagoons, as I said, back in '68. Those were converted into storm ponds. So as additional flows or as mechanical issues or anything happens at the sewage treatment plant, then the operations right now divert that flow to those lagoons or to those storm ponds. And as that sewage strength becomes more 100% sewage versus rainwater, we are getting some odors from that facility. There's been a perfect storm happen over, I guess it started last year. It's also been happening this year from about January. So last year, the issue was that those storm ponds in Ottawa came in front of council at the time and wanted to clean out those storm ponds because they hadn't been cleaned out in close to 15 years. So that was where the odor last year came from, is the actual cleaning out of those ponds where there was that biosolids in the bottom. There was the smell that was released from doing that clean out. Then this January, there was a clarifier part that broke in the sewage treatment plant. When that clarifier went down, the parts were ordered by operational staff, got stuck at the border for 3 weeks, so that clarifier was down for close to 6 weeks this January. Again, operationally, when processes are down at the plant, operations sends the sewage up to the storm ponds. to allow it then to come in slowly to the plant. But as that strength is back to basically sewage strength, that's causing odor issues from there. That then, with the clarifiers having an issue, sent the process down to the next one, which would have been the filters that were newly installed. They were not designed to handle what we refer to as bulking or large solids coming past that process in the treatment. That then caused issues at that point. And then there was one other component which has just recently been dealt with, which is the aeration basins. Because the clarifier was offline, sludge in the aeration basins also built up. And I think staff have some pictures if council wants to see them, of about 2 or 3 feet of sludge in the bottom of the aeration basins, which was also added to this. So the long story short is that there was several operational and process issues and repairs that happened. As each one of those happened, they could have an effect with the sewage treatment plant itself. But then the other portion was that while that plant or while the component is offline, the sewage gets diverted to the ponds, and that causes an issue from that perspective. So what is happening through the Class EA process, and the same thing happened as our recommendation on the filters, is as we're going through and as we're presenting these options, we're looking at each process to have redundancy so that if a pump's down, the other pumps can pump at that rate and still be able to pass through. If a filter's down, it can still work and operate at that level. So that is why when you go through that list and look at things and you say, well, we already have a headworks, why are we upgrading this? There may be 3 pumps in there. We want to ensure that any 2 pumps at any given time can meet that peak flow of the projected flow in the future, which right now, because there's been multiple phases of upgrades to the sewage treatment plant, as we go through that analysis, one process may be designed for 3,400 cubic meters to be able to process. The next one's at 33, the next one's at 37, the next one's at 26, and each of those affects the other processes as you go through it. Any mechanical errors or failures at this point are part of the snowball effect that is happening.
So even though we've had the misfortune of having a perfect storm of events that have led to this, I mean, is it fair to say that, you know, unless and until we get to a point where we don't have to use those ponds, that there's probably always going to be some degree of odor?
Yeah, at this point, there is a risk because of how well we've improved the system from the stormwater.
Concentrated sewage.
It's concentrated sewage at this point. So we have talked to the operational team about looking at immediate changes to their SCADA system and some of the other things that have been put in place with the old philosophy that, oh, if there's a peak flow, it must be rainwater, so it needs to go up to the lagoons. So we've initiated that process of looking at some of the things that are automatically happening on the operators, and that SCADA and control system be changed, a fairly low cost to do sort of those changes, and see whether then it can be more under the operator's control versus running over the old philosophy, which was if you were getting a peak flow, half of it must be rainwater, so that's where it gets subverted sort of thing. So there has been a changeover of staff both at a management level as well, which I think brings some other experts to the team from Aqua too, some fresh set of eyes to it. So I think working together we'll be able to come back with some positive interim solutions, but it really is true to say that until the capital upgrades are done at the plant, and if there's any dependency on those storm ponds, that there could still be odors based on just based on the distance of those ponds to the residential house.
And but even if we do all the capital upgrades, everything is done. And you say eliminate the ponds. Orangeville's always got a nasty habit of having to bypass and flow out to where it shouldn't be flowed out to, like credit. Toronto's had the issue of flowing it out into the lake when it shouldn't flow out. is it something we should always keep back in case there is a perfect storm where two systems go down and we need to bypass? And rather than bypass into Besley Creek or where, where we're not supposed to, we can bypass up into the ponds, order, no order, rather than causing an environmental issue?
And that's essentially what's happening now, is instead of having a bypass to the environment, the bypass is essentially happening to those storm ponds.
No, but I'm saying even if we do the 14 mil, whatever, upgrades, and we, just not totally eliminate those ponds, but keep those ponds as the bypass in case we have to?
It's one of the only plants that I've dealt with, probably 30, 40 plants that actually have that. If it was there as a polishing, where it was the effluent that was going through those ponds, or if it was being used as originally intended as a stormwater pond, I think the intent is very sound. I do have difficulty with if it is being used as raw sewage storage.
Not raw sewage.
Pardon?
Not raw sewage, no. I was just thinking like only, it's like an emergency, is what I was thinking, along that line there.
And to be fair, at this stage, that would flush out during more the detailed design. To be fair, we're at a higher level conceptual during an EA process where we've looked at designing and hitting each of those processes to be able to hit those emergencies in that high level. Similarly, there's several processes within the plant that don't have full redundancy. So they might have 50% redundancy, they might have some level of redundancy. But for example, when the clarifier went down and parts were stuck at the border for 3 weeks, that was the main clarifier. So there wasn't a backup to that. There isn't a redundancy to that. And that's where it had to be bypassed at this point. So I would probably reserve answering that question until we were into the detailed design phase of the project. Any other questions from council with respect to clarity on any of the odor issues or causes? The next update that I wanted to provide council was with respect to the water supply Class EA. As council, I believe, is well aware, Town of Shelburne has experienced naturally occurring arsenic levels in the groundwater supply. Specifically, this was at well 5-6 and well 3. There was a new guideline that came into effect January 1st of 2018, which reduced the arsenic level from 25 micrograms per liter down to 10 micrograms per liter. Just to bring this into context, historically well 5-6 had arsenic levels naturally occurring in the range of 15 to 16 micrograms per liter, and well 3 had historic levels just over 11 micrograms per liter. To alleviate this concern, there was a federal provincial EA completed several years ago, which looked at developing wells 7 and 8, and that work was undertaken. It did develop the new wells that are located in Melanchthon, and there was a pipe system brought back to wells 5 and 6 where that water was blended, and I can now tell council that that has successfully worked, and those levels have been under 8 micrograms per liter feeding into the system since that well was put in place. There was a similar plan proposed for well 3. However, as council knows from me coming in front of them before, it was determined through more engineering and more studying that the well 3 well could not be blended with the surrounding water because the surrounding distribution system similarly had about 11 micrograms per liter in the water. So this is what ultimately initiated the water supply Class EA as it is now, was to look at treatment alternatives for the arsenic at well 3, as well as looking at running well 7 and 8 concurrently. Right now, either 7 or 8 runs, so the EA would be required in order to run both those wells together and increase the flows at 7 and 8. So that's when we initiated that class environmental assessment, also approximately a year ago. For council's benefit, and again, I appreciate that most of the council already know this, we just put in a quick map to show sort of the location of well 1, location of well 3, location of 5, 6 on the western border, and then also where 7 and 8 pull out in length and mix with 5, 6. So through the Class EA process,
The Class EA process that we're going through for both wells 7 and 8, because we've done both of the wells individually, do we have to go through the full process for both wells?
so what it is, just to clarify the question, the original EA was done to run one well kicks in if you're increasing the taking from that well field. So the original EA, although it had envisioned that in the future additional takings could happen, there was never the testing that was done to run both wells at the same time, nor the permitting and approvals to take water from both at the same time. So that does require an update and a new EA for that process.
Is it a shorter time EA, or is it going to be the same length of time it took us with the original EA?
It should be a shorter EA. However, the interbasin discussion will still come into play. Just to explain to council, the well is within the Grand River Conservation Authority watershed, coming into the Nottawasaga Valley watershed, so it bumps it up to a higher level of review from the M&R and from the ministry, because it's referred to as an interbasin taking, because you're taking out of one watershed and putting into another watershed. The last EA did set the groundwork for that, and in fact, the person that got that approval, who used to be with Golder, is now with our firm, and so we do think it will be a quicker process through this time, but there was some hurdles to get through last time, I would say.
No thanks, is there?
So there was approval obtained from the ministry for testing and monitoring of 7 and 8 together. We were able to get that paperwork, to get that approval process, to run those 2 wells concurrently. There was also the upgrades done to the controls in the SCADA system, as well as lowering the wells, lowering the pumps in the wells, because if they run together, the interference between the 2 pumps would lower the water level to a greater degree if each one was running on its own. And so that work was completed in August of 2018. One of the shortfalls of that testing was, as I said, even though the original EA and the original design ought to have taken into consideration in the future both pumps running together, the previous consultant did not size the pumps to be able to run together. And so instead of us being able to pump each of the wells at 250 gallons a minute, which would be our ideal, we were only able to run the 2 pumps at approximately 409 combined, so just over 200 gallons per minute, because of pump limitations, not because of the aquifer limitations. So the difficulty with that is we are at a crossroad where I will have to come back in front of council, and I do believe I'm on schedule for the next council meeting to come back for a decision from council as to whether we would replace those pumps to be able to test it at the higher rate that was originally envisioned, or whether we would just move forward with the data that we have and use that information. So I will be coming back to council for direction on that. At this point, it was just to provide council with some background to it and dealing as we move forward with it. So we are at a wee bit of a disadvantage, is that our firm did come on for the inspection of that work, but we're not involved in the detailed design or the initial stages of that. It was the previous municipal engineer, so we're kind of dealing with what we find as we go through that process. So. We have been monitoring throughout that testing program, and as you can see on the next page, it kind of shows the different wells and the different area that we did monitor. And through that process, it has been proven that we could get up to the 500 gallons per minute. There may be 2 private wells that are slightly affected with their water levels, but would not affect their long-term sustainability of their wells. So again, I will be bringing more detail forward to council for direction at a subsequent meeting. Are there any additional questions or anything that's unclear for council with respect to the Class EA or the water supply update?
If we pump both wells 7 and 8, if we're able to pump them together, we still need to do work at well 3 though.
Yes.
They would still not collect enough water to reduce the arsenic level.
I think the difficulty would be, as you pointed out, the time frame associated with pumping 7 and 8 and getting through the full approvals process as well as its capital changes. It was decided based on previous projects and based on previous that we would come forward with the well 3 project. So it will be awful close, Walter, but it would not satisfy the long term without having them together. It would satisfy current, but not any long term.
And so the second, why would we have to pump well 7 and 8 at 500 and not at a lower level and require new pumps? Because if we have well 3 and wells 6 and 7 and wells 7 and 8 all running at the same time, do we need to have that higher flow to, is that just for the growth of the town?
So, and again, I'll be able to bring some of these numbers forward at the decision-making council meeting, but similar to the process that we've gone through on the sewage side, we need to be looking forward for the next 20 years and looking at that sort of growth of 13 to 15,000. So the short answer is, in order to get to those potentials, you will need both. If we had lost well 3 now,
we wouldn't be able to do that.
We couldn't meet the 2016 water levels that were recorded for max day. So there was an urgency put on well 3 from the perspective that the ministry did have the option of shutting well 3 down on January 1st, 2018. We met between staff, the ministry, and the health unit to not have that happen, and they've been on board and part of this, but further delays to well 3 would potentially change that cooperation, I guess is the best way to put it.
And you'll be back on the 24th and
With more detail.
we'll look at that in a little more detail. Okay.
And then my last update was really with respect to the well 3 work that has been authorized by council. We have completed the preliminary plans and building layout. We have confirmed with the ministry that the treatment being added to pump house 3 is what's referred to as that Schedule A activity, so it does not require a full public process. It is able to move forward based on the previous direction that has already been provided. It does not require that additional EA work. Next steps is to finalize the 66% design and meet with operations staff to ensure they're happy with the layout. Obtain those permits and approvals for the drinking water amendment, and proceed to public tender for construction, and ultimately bringing a design on board that reduces the levels of arsenic at well 3. I believe the pilot testing showed it was down by about 97%, so under 1 microgram per liter, going through the work that we piloted for that treatment system. And I do apologize to council on a long night that there was a long-winded presentation, but I hope that brings council up to speed, and as noted, I will be back for just some direction on the Class EA for the water supply.
All helpful information to have. So the motion reads, be it resolved that council receives the general engineering update from Burnett Associates as presented. Mover and seconder for that. Moved by Councilor Fegan, seconded by Councilor Bonato. Any comments? All in favor? Carried. Before we move on, I just need a verbal motion to allow us to sit past 10. Moved by Councilor Buffett, seconded by Councilor Hull. All in favor? Carried. And also just a reminder, under our new procedural bylaw, we are not permitted to sit past 11 o'clock, and we can't waive the procedural bylaw to allow for that. So we have about 55 minutes to get through the rest of it. So be judicious with your questions. so with that, all right, so the next report is from the treasurer regarding the debt management policy. So Carrie, would you
I will try
discuss
to
that?
keep this quick. I'm not going to go through the policy verbatim. I'm assuming you've all had a chance to read it. We have touched on municipal debt twice this year. Once with the council education session, and then again in February with the debt capacity update, which is actually attached to this.
Pass the mic down, everyone.
Which is actually attached to this report. Two important items that I want to touch on for the presentation that I want to remind you of again is firstly that the annual repayment limit as provided annually by the ministry is based on 2-year-old financial data. And what that means is that it takes 2 years after the retirement of any debt or after the increase of any own source revenues to fully affect the debt capacity number. Own source revenues include taxes and user fees, but does not include grants or subsidies, proceeds from the sale of real property, or contributions from reserves or reserve funds such as DCs, nor does it include assets such as donated separations. Secondly, the town's financial statements are consolidated with the joint boards of management, such as the fire department, library, arena, and the BIA. Essentially what this means is that their own source revenues serve to inflate our revenue numbers, which also means that the borrowing capacity allotted to the town is not solely for the town's use. The town needs to leave enough room within its borrowing capacity to be able to accommodate not only emergency situations, but also the needs of the boards that make up the town. You have heard me say before that the provincial rule of debt capacity has been recognized as being generously high, since maintaining debt repayment levels of 25% of own source revenues would require tax increases in order to maintain core service levels. Keeping in line with neighboring municipal and county debt policies, staff are recommending that a maximum permitted amount of long-term debt shall not be more than 40% of the amount determined under the province's ARL calculation. There are many benefits of adopting a debt management policy, which are outlined in my report. In addition to providing a tool to meet financial obligations in a fiscally responsible manner, the debt policy also provides guidelines for and places limits upon the use of debt as a method of financing capital projects. Traditionally, the town has used Infrastructure Ontario as a source for funding needs. Obviously, other sources are also researched in order to obtain the best financial arrangement being offered at the time. Infrastructure Ontario offers competitive rates and tailor their loans to meet the unique needs of complex development challenges that are faced by their public sector clients. Staff are currently working on a borrowing bylaw, which will be provided to council later in the year once the borrowing needs have been established. You have just heard the report from the town engineer, and the need for future funding is imminent. Staff will source as many forms of government grants that may be available based on project eligibility, and we will continue to encourage the building of reserves. We will also be suggesting that the 2017 water and sewer rate study be amended to reflect additional projects so that water and sewer rates are more reflective of their needs. Another note that is worth mentioning tonight is that Bill 108, which is the More Homes, More Choices Act, received royal assent. This act makes significant changes with respect to development charges, among other things. While we don't know the full effects of the bill or how the transition will unfold, as it will require numerous regulations for implementation, what we do know is that DC revenues will be recovered more slowly over several years and at an older rate than might be the current rate at the time of collection. And finally, there is no immediate financial implication to adopting this policy tonight. Future financial benefits will be seen later by the fact that a clear line with respect to financial sustainability has been set.
Well, we'll get the motion on the floor and then we can ask for questions. All right, so the motion is be it resolved the council receives report FS 2019-09 from the treasurer and the council approves the debt management policy as presented and that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 37-2019 being a bylaw to adopt the debt management policy as presented. A mover and seconder to get that on the floor. Moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Buffett. Any questions for the treasurer? Any comments? No? All right. All in favor? Motion's carried.
I'm gonna go down.
Okay, so the next report is a report from our CAO regarding the Shelburne Police Services Facility Review, general background and summary. As the CAO will mention, I'm sure this is in response to a motion that was passed a few meetings ago asking staff to kind of summarize some of the work that has been done over the past couple of years with respect to police facilities and accommodations, and then specifically to look at the renovation and expansion option with fresh eyes to see if that can be achieved under a $3 million budget.
So just to clarify, if we went through all of this report, we'd probably be at least 40 minutes. So for, I guess, an awareness of the time, I'm going to go through the history very quickly. People can read the history. So obviously, as per the direction, we've summarized what was taking place with the accommodation team in the past. I just wanted to note that everybody's aware of the history of the original renovation of the town hall in '94, where we went from about 9,000 square feet to 17,000 square feet, of which 5,000 was new square footage for police services. The sum is that it's been identified through the 2015 study, which a consultant was hired, that there was deficiencies in that current space post the renovation, and there were a number of things that needed to be addressed. The Walter Fetty report is fully attached. They have reviewed a number of functional reviews in that report and looked at three main options, which ranged in price from about $2.4 million to $4.132 million. And in all of those scenarios that were done at that time, there was an average of 8,000 to 9,000 square feet that would have been provided for police services exclusively. I've summarized all of the file information from the accommodation review. There were different scenarios. Steve's firm, Steve behind me, had also looked at a peer review of some of that information. There were different outcomes with respect to recommendations. The first one was that there was a support that a new build would probably be the most strategic. That later was peer reviewed again, where it was determined that a renovation would have been the most appropriate approach. Additionally, through the process, the square footage that was required by police services increased to approximately 10,000 square feet. So again, there was another analysis completed by the second subcommittee where they were looking at now 4 different options. There was the renovation of Town Hall, which just included an expansion to the council chambers. And again, this was at the high end of $6.4 million. There was also renovation of the hall with no council chambers, a new police station, and I have footnoted that no location for that police station was ever stated. And then there was the purchase and renovation of other buildings, and there was some review undertaken at the time for what potential properties could have been acquired. I will note that the team at that time also did a review and did a tour of the OPP detachment at Primrose and 89, and that's the same detachment office that is located today. As council, some of you did go on a tour through the costing process at the front end. We have just reconfirmed, for sake of clarity, that the square footage of that building is approximately 11,000 square feet. That provincial and community policing is provided through the building for 6 municipalities, and I've listed their populations based on the 2016 census, which is approximately 24,709 people, and that their they actually police a fairly large geographic area of about 1,400 square kilometers. In contrast, Shelburne is, based on the 2016 census, 8,100 people, and we're 6.6. Len said 6.5, I think it's 6.6. It doesn't really matter. And additionally, in the 11,000 square feet that the OPP has, they indicated that they could fully accommodate the policing services for Shelburne And currently they have 31 people, which is comprised of officers and administration on that square footage. On the tour, we were told that the capacity was closer to 50 people operating out of that facility. So there were a number of requests over the time period since council asked for an OPP costing to be completed. I will note there's a typo on the December date. It should have been 2/17. That's my fault. I apologize. I'm not going to go through every single one of those requests. All of the motions are attached as an addendum, and all of the decisions of council are also in that summary. Additionally, I will note that there was a presentation by a private developer, the Shelburne Green Development Group, that suggested council consider the possibility of converting 101 Main Street. So this was independent of the Shelburne Police Services Board, and the Shelburne Police Services Board let their decision be known to council that they didn't want to proceed with that because they had had that peer reviewed. So that brings us to, I think the most important component of tonight's presentation. Council had asked us to look at a facility renovation of the existing space not exceeding $3 million. I have referenced the prior costs, many of which were well over $3 million. So we took the approach that council was asking us not to borrow more than $3 million. The utilization of development charges would be for what it was intended to be, and that is for expansion or support. So our current DCs are about $437,000. We've estimated based on future development that's already scheduled where we would be in the next couple of years. And that would be a combined cost or combined income of about $872,000 with another $435,000 scheduled to be arrived. So the expansion budget based on this approach is a $3.86 million facility, and that is currently incorporating, as I've said, all existing and future DCs. The timing of a renovation, obviously, because these are 220 costs in terms of the budget and the schedule Steve is going to outline, would be impacted depending on when the project would be undertaken. It could also affect the timing of the DCs, whereby if we didn't have all of the DCs that are anticipated for the future, then we would have no choice but to borrow more than $3 million. So we looked at a general space plan based on about 8,700 square feet. And this is a combination of renovating 2,600 square feet of the existing 5,000 and then adding about 3,700 square feet for, as I said, a combined total of 8,760. The general space plan is located on having all three functional areas on 3 floors and adding a dedicated elevator for policing services. So that is obviously in addition to the community public elevator in the main reception entrance. The construction costs are based on the following. I know that we had indicated in another meeting that 500 a square foot and renovation was closer to 300, and there was some, I guess, question whether that was accurate. It is accurate if you build in all of the contingency costs that go with that cost. So if we simply said they were only 320 a square foot, that's not going to be what the end cost is. Steve is going to go through all that. So it's critical that when we look at full costing for these capital projects, that we build in our contingencies, we build in our HST, the engineering and architectural fees that are not insignificant in terms of cost at 15%. And we've been very generous in this budget, including 8% for FF&E, but in a new facility, you're going to need a lot of that. So the space plan that, again, in working with, and predominantly it's this team here behind me, this firm, is in Appendix 5. Steve is going to walk you through that, as well as the budget.
It was presented in the report as a 1,500 square foot expansion, 3 levels, but with the upper level not being part of police services and being part of town. That then expanded, as was talked about throughout the process, to close to a 10,000 square foot. If everything was on one single level, limited services in the basement because of some issues with the basement, and then removing all services from the upper floor. That did pencil out in the close to $6 million range, which put it very comparable to a $10,000 build, which is where I guess things stopped in the process before. Going back to this, what we tried to do is take that 10,000 square foot discussion that had happened, so that we were hitting the high points of the issues with the current building. Also took into consideration some of the concerns with HVAC in the basement, wet areas, etc. But as was pointed out, this is concept only. This was put at a level where it would still require a review from the folks that would be using it. This was just an exercise to determine what could be provided for that $3 million plus DC costs. So what I can say is we did come up with a concept that works. It's actually an expanded footprint compared to the original concept. It's about 1,880 square feet per floor. Would be the renovation of the basement, as was pointed out, renovation of the main floor, or first floor that it's been called, leaving the Sally Port where it currently is, because that was one of the major renovations in the last go round, and ultimately trying to accommodate as many of the check boxes that had been put forward in that sort of more expensive and single level concept as possible. It would, in the basement, basically set up a new area and eliminate the need for the holding cells that are in the basement, as well as improve the HVAC and some other items from that scenario, which were very problematic to police services as the building currently sits. As was noted by Denise, there is a dedicated elevator so that those services can be accessed by police separate from the public one, which is also a major concern brought forward at that time. The first floor renovations, again, working on that footprint and trying to maximize what could be put in. It's maybe easier to that council can see, was essentially putting in all of the same items that were identified in the 10,000 square foot, with a rearranged arrangement for holding cells onto the main level in order to accommodate some of the major concerns that came forward from police services. One of the things that I do need to point out to council is that would sever the connection of that main corridor between police services and town hall, which would actually result in a separate entrance for police services, just so that portion of it could be accommodated. Now, to be fair, on a $3 million budget, you're not getting everything that was in a $6 million budget. I don't know anyone that can do that math, so there were some things that were cut out. There was a large community meeting room that was identified as a nice to have or an option in that design that has been removed. There's been one office space removed that was discussed with police services, and a few other things that have been removed from that. But ultimately, it's looking at trying to accommodate as many of those services as we could on the main floor without being limited to some of the items being on other floors. The second floor, really in the previous concept, the second floor was to ultimately remove police services from the second floor and move it down into either the main level or the basement so that they would only be on 2 levels. We were not able to accommodate that with this budget. Police services would still retain the same area that they do have on the 3rd floor, and it would continue to operate as it does now under this budget, but we have come up with a solution that does match and fit in to the budget of the 3 million plus DCs. As noted, I believe in Appendix 5 of the report. I can go through line by line if council would like me to, but ultimately Denise was bang on that the prices per square foot are in line with current construction for 2020 construction. We do account for, and I know council's heard me come in front of you before with this, we account for the contingencies that should be in place. We account for architectural and engineering costs. We've accounted for FF&E costs. That is a true budgetary number to be carried. Our goal as your engineering consultant and as coming forward is to give you a number that's 3 to 5%, 6% higher than what the lowest tender bid would come in. So accounting for all costs, there is relocation costs of sanitary system and electrical in the parking lot area that the building expansion would move into, and those are all accounted for in the costing. We have used general costing as per 500 a square foot or 490 a square foot if we're saying an all-in price inclusive of those items. But one thing I do want to point out to council is if I even go back to the Walter Fetty report that was in 2015, and I project using just an inflationary number moving forward with their numbers that were put forward, we're within about 2% with our numbers on all of their options and all of our options comparing. So it's not skewed. It is the number that should be carried from a 2020 perspective. And we have found conceptually, I would never say that we could go to construction with this. This needs to be vetted, needs to be made sure that it could work, but we have found a solution that could work with the $3 million allocation as directed. I did also, although it's a little pixelated, and I apologize for that, but there is a concept of where the addition would add on. It is only a single story addition. We would recommend that it be done as a flat roof, as the last concept was put forward as a flat roof. And the advantage to that would be down the road, if council chose to build a third story, or it would be a second story really, and match the decor of the existing building, that would still be possible. So I do apologize. It was not the greatest printout, but it does kind of show you the concept of what it would look like. So
Looks good. Thanks, Steve. I mean, when you and I originally sort of sat down, I think, you know, my hope was, and it was probably wishful thinking, my hope was the $3 million would allow us to do a second story as well at this point. I get it, you know, you can't make that fit within the $3 million sort of ceiling that we've set out, but I do like the fact that, you know, we're leaving that option open at least for a later date. I mean, in my mind, what this presents, no, it's probably not a perfect solution, but when you look at the major concerns that have been identified with the current facility, primarily the location of the cell block being downstairs, this addresses that.
Yep.
And you know, I would hazard to say that, you know, this probably, you know, provides council with the only option that's within our means, really, to address those concerns. So thanks for the efforts on that. I mean, I know we're not at the end of it, but I think that's a good positive first step. So, and any other questions before Denise goes back through the financial implications of this?
Can I see those drawings? Because I can't see it nothing. Just far
None of us could up close, so
I have no idea what
you'll leave them. I'm assuming. Okay. Is it possible to get some larger printouts? Because even the smaller ones that are in our agenda package, I mean,
yeah,
I can't really read what the.
I printed two, one color and one black and white for tonight. I'll leave both of those for council, and then we can definitely, to be fair, we can run a 2x3 set for all of council and drop them off tomorrow for everyone to be able to have the larger set.
What about a digital PDF? Can we get a large version that you blow up? We post it on the website.
Okay. Great. Thank you, sir.
So with respect to how the funding for a $3 million loan would be implemented, we go through Infrastructure Ontario. We gave you the rates that are outlined as of 14th of May, like any rate they can change with the posting. And we would also be eligible for part of the project to be funded through a construction loan, which is a little bit lower at 2.23. So we had outlined for you how this would be funded, and consistent with the debt policy that you just heard, we wouldn't be borrowing anything over 20 years. So we've provided two scenarios with terms of 20 years, and all of the amortization schedules were attached in the appendix, so you can see year by year what the principal and interest payments would be, as well as for 15. So at a high level, if we borrowed $3 million for 20 years at 3%, we would do two scheduled payments annually, but just over $100,200. So just over $200,000 a year annually for 40 payments, and the interest on that loan would be just over $1 million. The impact on the taxes would be a dedicated amount solely for this facility of 2.88% for those 20 years. Additionally, if we reduce it to a 15-year term and borrow $3 million at 2.85, the scheduled payments annually based on 2 would be about $247 for 30 payments, and the total interest would be $707. So by paying it off quicker, just like your mortgage, you reduce the total interest. However, when you do that, In this scenario, the tax implications then increase to 3.55% annually. And like I said, the amortization schedules are included in the appendix. Similar to what was undertaken through the budget process, a number of different assessments have been provided. And again, this chart is difficult to read because to get all that information collated there, we have to use an Excel, so thanks so much to Carrie for doing that. So I'm going to walk this through because I think this is important. Because in addition to what we did for the budget process, this time we've added a number of commercial and large industrial properties because the tax impacts for those business owners or operations is significant. So for example, for an average residential, which is currently paying or has an assessment of 313, their annual increase will be 60, 40, 90. I know there was some information before. We've used, and again, sorry if you live on these streets, we've looked at William Street and Summerhill and what those implications would be, and that can range as low as 3165 of an annual increase to 5543. There are some scenarios where homes that are on Birch Grove and Maple Court, for example, would see an annual increase based on these scenarios of about 121,673 or 107,35. If we move into the commercial and some of the business properties, for example, a medium-sized commercial in our community would see an average increase per year of 395,000, and a large industrial will see an increase of about 10,500. So I'm just highlighting the range, and that will be for 20 or 15 years. So every year embedded in your taxes will be that amount for those properties. What we've also indicated is that tax implication is exclusive to this project, and that assumes borrowing $3 million. This would be not taking into consideration any other tax-supported operating budget adjustments or increases, whether you have phase and assessment values will increase your taxes, or other capital funding, as we've just overviewed tonight. I will note, of course, that water and wastewater is not tax-supported operating budget, and how that will affect us will be in the debt capacity that we have in our ARL, but it will simply put a burden on us as well in terms of that. There's a couple of policies that was just passed tonight. One of them that in fact says draft is now approved. And obviously the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, with their ARL, this project would then be rolled into that capacity. And if it was more than $3 million, it would be adjusted accordingly. So that is actually our very quick report on a very significant issue. So we're happy to take any additional questions.
Are there any questions for Denise? So the motion be it resolved, the council receives report CAO 2019-07 for information regarding the Shelburne Police Services facility review, general background and summary, and that the report be referred to the Police Services Board and Chief of Police for consideration and comment for council's consideration at the June 24th, 2019 meeting. The mover and seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Wegner. Any comments or questions on that? I'll just make one brief comment. Our next Police Services Board meeting is next Tuesday night, so that will give us enough time to go over this as a board and then report back to council for our 24th meeting. Right. No further comments? All in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, so next is consideration of a Community Excellence nomination for Shelburne resident Beverly Pryor's volunteer time spent at Shepherd's Covered Food Bank. The nomination forms in the package. The motion reads, be it resolved, the council awards the Community Excellence Award to Beverly Pryor, and that Ms. Pryor and Food Bank representatives be invited to the June 24th, 2019 council meeting for presentation of the award. The mover and seconder for that, moved by Councillor Donato, seconded by Councillor Wegner. All in favor? Carried. Next is a letter from Centennial Highlands Elementary School looking for funding support for their science, music, and art trophies for the 2019 graduation ceremonies, and asking that a member of council be available on June 25th at the graduation ceremony to present that award. Any volunteers for that? Nobody wants to. I'll do that one actually as a grad of Centennial Highlands myself. I wouldn't mind that. So. Oh, is it?
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, so the motion is, be it resolved, the council receives a letter from Centennial Highlands Elementary School dated May 16th, 2019, is presented and circulated. And further, the council supports the request in the amount of $75 for their science, music, and art awards, and that Councillor Fegan and Mayor Mills will attend on June 25th graduation ceremony to present the awards.
Actually, sorry, I just realized that I was wrong.
Okay, so you don't want to go? Okay.
I better not, I'd be dead otherwise.
All right. So I'll be there on my own. Mover and seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Donato. All in favor? Carried. Next is bylaw number 38-2019. For us to enter into an agreement with Central Counties Regional Tourism for the partnership funds to assist with wayfinding signage. So the motion reads, be it resolved that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 38-2019, being a bylaw to enter into an agreement with Zone 6 Regional Tourism Organization for partnership funds to assist with wayfinding signage. Moved by Councillor Donato, seconded by Councillor Wegner. All in favor? Carried. Any notices of motion? Notice of motion moved by Councillor Donato, seconded by Councillor Wegner. So this will be considered at the June 24th meeting. It reads, be it resolved, the staff prepare a report to council on what the change in bylaw enforcement from complaint to proactive would entail. So we'll consider that at the next meeting. Any other notices of motion? All right, that brings us to communications. Motion be it resolved, the council receives items number 1 to 4 under 9.0 communications. Moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Donato. All in favor? Carried. Confirming bylaw, be it resolved that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 40-2019, being a bylaw to confirm certain proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Shelburne for its regular council meeting held June 10th, 2019. Mover, Councillor Wagner, seconded by Councillor Donato. All in favor? Carried. And finally, be it resolved that we now adjourn to meet at the call of the mayor. Moved by Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? Carried. Thank you all. It was a long night, but we managed it through.